Today we're talking about a thrilling Korean mystery film. If you were a normal person, but were forcibly locked inside a psychiatric hospital, how would you prove that you are not mentally ill? And if the hospital director happened to be a deranged man, what kind of torment would you go through? The story begins. A beautifully dressed woman is walking down the street. She is openly abducted by men in black and forced into an ambulance, but she has no illness at all. Yet she is taken into a private psychiatric hospital. What exactly is their purpose? They forcibly take the woman into a restroom, remove her clothing, and roughly scrub her body with a brush. The woman is terrified and trembling against the wall. After being cleaned by the nurses, she is brought in front of the hospital director. The woman looks in pain. Her hands struggle constantly, unable to even speak. To force her into obedience, the director signals two nurses to take her to a corner and beat her severely. The woman's name is Jenny, and she has been kidnapped and locked inside this hospital. The male nurse who delivers her medication is named Carl. He is the only person in this hospital with a bit of compassion, and tells her she must take the medication in order to survive. Jenny insists that she is not a mental patient, and begs Carl to help her make a phone call for rescue. She then grabs paper and pen from Carl and writes down a phone number, but Carl warns her that patients are not allowed to use sharp objects in the hospital. Their argument attracts other nurses. The nurses snatch the medication from Carl and force it into Jenny's mouth. At night, all the patients come out of their rooms. A disturbed woman approaches Jenny. She tells Jenny that while she was resting at home, a group suddenly broke in and forcibly brought her to this psychiatric hospital. Jenny, hearing such a similar experience, feels a sense of connection, but as they talk, Jay's behavior suddenly becomes chaotic and irrational. She starts talking about imaginary illnesses. It turns out the director has been controlling her by forcing her to take large amounts of medication, and Jay tells Jenny that there is a disturbed male patient living right next door. That night, Jenny is awakened by strange noises from the next room and falls to the floor in fear. It turns out the man next door is reaching through a gap in the wall, secretly touching Jenny. She curls up in a corner, trembling in fear. Meanwhile, the disturbed Jay secretly leaves her room and wanders the hallway. Jenny witnesses this scene. Jay sneaks into the director's office. The director gives her a pill, and she reacts violently, collapsing backward onto the table. The director stands over her. It is clear he has been using medication to mentally control Jay for a long time. Jay is given unknown drugs every day, enough to break even a normal person. Jenny is already on the edge of collapse. She has tried to escape, but is always caught and beaten by nurses. Anyone sent into the operating room never comes back alive. Clearly, something far more terrifying is hidden inside. Time is running out. One day, Jenny gathers courage and asks the disturbed man next door how to escape, but the man demands that she come to the bathroom in the early morning for a disturbing exchange. Jenny, desperate to escape, reluctantly agrees. The next morning, she carefully goes to the bathroom to meet him. The man tells Jenny that the escape route is hidden inside the director's office, and reveals the office password. Jenny hears the information she has been looking for. After a moment of hesitation, she slowly kneels down. But the man soon suffers a severe injury and is left bleeding heavily. This incident causes a major disturbance in the hospital. All medical staff rush over to check on the injured patient. Jenny takes advantage of the chaos and sneaks into the director's office to enter the password, but she fails to open the door. Realizing the man had deceived her, Jenny is thrown into panic. At that moment, Jay walks up to her. Jenny urgently asks her for the door password, but Jay does not understand her and slowly walks away. However, she begins tapping on a wall. It turns out Jay cannot remember numbers, but remembers the director's unlocking hand gestures. Jenny suddenly realizes the truth. She finally manages to open the director's office door. Inside the office, Jenny desperately searches for a hidden passage. Not daring to waste a single second, she eventually finds the secret tunnel and enters it. But during the descent, a protruding steel bar tears through her clothing. The faint noise alerts the director inside the room. He follows the sound and realizes someone has entered the tunnel. He leans out, and in that moment, he comes face to face with Jenny inside the tunnel. Jenny desperately escapes from the terrifying psychiatric hospital. She staggers onto the busy streets of the city. Unexpectedly, this corrupt hospital is located right in the center of a bustling urban area. surrounded by towering buildings. The darkness of the place feels even more absurd and twisted. It painfully exposes the ugliness and cruelty of human nature. Jenny has already been tortured beyond recognition, walking weakly through the streets. People passing by glance her up and down at the disheveled woman covered in injuries, but no one stops to help. At that moment, Jenny suddenly turns around and sees black-clad men and an ambulance rushing toward her from a distance. It is the same group that abducted her. Terrified, Jenny turns and runs for her life. She sprints all the way to the main road. This time, she is lucky enough to encounter a passing police patrol. Jenny is taken into the police car and temporarily escapes her pursuers. The police prepare to escort her safely home, but the route keeps becoming more and more familiar, until the destination turns out to be the exact same psychiatric hospital she just escaped from. Yes, Jenny is forcibly returned to the hospital. The police, the director, and the black-clad men are all working together. Jenny struggles violently against the nurses trying to stop her, but she is once again dragged back into the hospital. However, this time she is not taken to a ward. She is sent directly to a cold operating table. On the surface, the hospital appears to be a private care facility, but in reality, it has long been involved in illegal organ trafficking. They capture innocent people and harvest matching organs for dark underground trade. Carl, the kind-hearted nurse, is called into the operating room. The director orders him to take a box from the table. Carl walks forward, accidentally knocking it over, and is horrified to discover it is filled with fresh human organs. This is the first time the director openly exposes the illegal organ trade to Carl. His conscience is shaken to the core at this moment. Even after being violently beaten by the director, his remaining sense of humanity cannot be erased. Carl secretly goes to the archive room. He finds the emergency phone number Jenny once wrote down and quickly dials it. Carl successfully contacts Jenny's boyfriend, Corey. After learning the truth, Corey immediately drives toward the psychiatric hospital. When he arrives, he happens to see a corrupt official who is secretly protecting the hospital. He quickly hides himself. The corrupt official meets with the director in his office. The two secretly discuss plans to expand the hospital and continue their illegal operations. Carl takes the opportunity to sneak downstairs. He meets Corey, and together they quietly infiltrate the hospital. They make their way up to the operating room. Finally, they find Jenny, barely alive, lying weakly on the operating table. Corey carries Jenny and attempts to escape with Carl, but at the end of the hallway, they run straight into the demon-like hospital director. Carl is brutally thrown to the ground and beaten. Corey, unaware of the hospital's brutal rules, angrily confronts and insults the director. In the next moment, he is surrounded by nurses and violently beaten. He still does not realize he is about to fall into a living nightmare. He is then restrained on the operating table, about to have his organs forcibly removed. The director coldly picks up a chainsaw and begins the procedure. Corey lets out a horrifying scream of pain. Suddenly, an emergency alert comes from outside. The director rushes out to investigate and happens to see Jay running out of the office in panic. It turns out Jay took advantage of the chaos and set fire to the director's office. Flames quickly spread and engulf the entire psychiatric hospital. Jay wanders aimlessly to the entrance of the operating room. With Jenny's guidance, Jay manages to untie the ropes binding her. After being freed, Jenny immediately releases Carl and Corey. The three of them support each other and try to escape the burning hell. However, during the escape, Carl accidentally picks up the master access card dropped by the director. He looks back at the helpless patients trapped inside the hospital rooms. Unable to ignore their desperate cries for help, he turns around and rushes back into the fire, determined to save them. Meanwhile, Jenny and Corey continue fleeing, but suddenly, the director emerges from the flames and drags Corey back into the fire. Jenny stands frozen in shock. From that moment on, Corey and all the evil hidden within the hospital are completely consumed by the fire. The corrupt official protecting the operation is later mysteriously shot dead at home. Jenny, as the only survivor of the fire disaster, is labeled the prime suspect. She is placed in a closed psychiatric facility, awaiting trial. Not long after, a journalist named John arrives at the facility for an exclusive interview with Jenny, because he had recently received a handwritten notebook from a viewer. The notebook documented everything Jenny experienced inside the psychiatric hospital. After reading it, John believes that if he can interview Jenny, the case will explode in popularity and ratings. But Jenny refuses all interviews. John leaves his business card behind. Waiting for her to contact him, He then brings his production team to film a preview about the case. They head to the burned-down psychiatric hospital. While filming, they unexpectedly encounter a suspicious figure. The strange appearance of the person frightens the crew. John follows the traces left by the figure to a stairwell. There, he finds a severely injured man with bandages wrapped around his head. John kindly takes him to the hospital for treatment. According to the doctor, the man's identity is revealed. He is Carl, the kind-hearted nurse from the psychiatric hospital. Why Carl survived and appeared here raises even more questions for John. He investigates online and retrieves all records of the hospital fire incident. He is shocked to discover that the corrupt official who died was actually Jenny's stepfather. The connections are chilling. Jenny had just escaped the hospital, and her stepfather was mysteriously killed soon after. The journalist senses that there must be a hidden truth behind the entire case. In order to secure a one-on-one interview with Jenny, John fabricates fake news. He arranges for staff to impersonate the surviving Carl. To avoid detection, their faces are blurred and censored. The footage is edited into a news preview clip. In the special care facility, Jenny eventually sees the fabricated news broadcast as planned. John, driven purely by ratings and personal ambition, produces the report only to attract attention in traffic. After the broadcast goes public, he finally secures an exclusive one-on-one interview with Jenny. He lays out every clue and connection he has uncovered. According to his findings, her stepfather, the powerful official Wu, had long been controlling psychiatric drugs through the hospital to generate massive illegal profits. And Jenny's confinement was never an accident. It was carefully planned so her stepfather could take full control of her mother's fortune. If Jenny were declared mentally ill and permanently institutionalized, everything would legally transfer into his name. John keeps pressing for answers while quietly turning off his recorder. He suggests she doesn't need to talk about anything related to the alleged killing. She only needs to confirm the corruption inside the hospital and the officials' involvement. He also tells her this interview could help overturn her case and reduce her sentence. Then he turns the recorder back on, but Jenny still refuses to speak about what happened inside the hospital. Frustrated, John pushes harder, trying to provoke a reaction. He begins feeding her his own version of events, that her stepfather abused her for years, that she developed hatred and eventually snapped, that after escaping the hospital, she took revenge and killed him. But this time, Jenny breaks, and she finally tells the truth. Her stepfather did abuse her, and he used psychiatric medication to control and destroy her mother over time, but she did not kill him. After escaping the hospital, she followed him home in secret. As she reached the stairs, she heard a gunshot from inside the house. When she entered, he was already lying in a pool of blood. He had taken his own life. John compiles all the verified evidence and publishes a full investigative report. The story exposes the illegal organ trade and deep government corruption tied to the psychiatric hospital. It spreads quickly, triggering nationwide outrage. Crowds gather outside the courthouse. Most people believe Jenny is the true victim of everything that happened. In the end, she is declared not guilty and released. On the day of her release, John is waiting outside. Maybe it's gratitude for the success the story brought him, or maybe it's guilt finally catching up. He personally drives her home. Before leaving, Jenny says something strange and unsettling. In that hospital, even a pen can be considered a weapon. They would never allow patients to have one. Her words linger with hidden meaning, a final clue no one fully understands yet. She walks back into her home alone. She removes her clothes and reveals deep scars covering her back. Inside the house, there is an old photograph of her as a child with her biological father. The man in the photo looks strikingly similar to the boyfriend she once imagined. Meanwhile, John suddenly remembers something from years ago. A girl named Jenny had once called the TV station, asking for help to find her missing mother. He ignored it at the time. Now, all the fragmented clues begin to connect, and the truth finally comes into focus. The person who was originally taken to the psychiatric hospital was Jenny's mother, and the one who infiltrated the system to rescue her was Jenny herself. The boyfriend who appeared throughout the story was never real. He was a psychological creation formed in her mind during extreme trauma. After realizing everything, John sits quietly in his car and lets out a hollow smile. The film is built entirely on shifting perspectives and constant twists. Inside the hospital, pens, sharp objects, and even simple writing tools are strictly forbidden, so a handwritten notebook would never realistically exist there, which raises one final question. Who wrote the notebook that started everything? Was it Carl, the nurse with a conscience? Or was it part of Jenny's carefully constructed plan all along? In the end, maybe the truth doesn't even matter anymore. Jenny got her revenge and survived. The journalist got his ratings and fame. The audience got their sensational story. Everyone walked away satisfied in their own way, because people only see the version of truth they want to believe, and they ignore everything hidden beneath it. If John hadn't manipulated the story for ratings, everything might have ended differently. The film ultimately exposes a harsh reflection of society itself. When the camera pans across the streets, people stare at Jenny's broken state with curiosity, but no compassion. Only when the media turns it into a story does sympathy appear. Online outrage explodes. Real-world kindness disappears. The contrast is uncomfortable but painfully real. And after watching this film, one question remains. If you were trapped in the same situation, how far would you go just to survive?